Welcome to Co-Opinions. I'm your host, Josh, and today I have Brent with me.
Yep.
So, Brent, why don't you go ahead and get us started with some little news bits from the last week you found interesting?
Well, we finally got that announcement of the Batman Return to Arkham HD collection.
I know that was something that everybody was kind of anticipating. I think the most surprising thing about that is the fact that they didn't include Arkham Origins, which isn't surprising in execution, but it's still an interesting thing they chose.
Well, it also wasn't made by Rocksteady, so...
That's why it's not surprising in execution. What else?
Disney Interactive shut down this week. That was some major news right there. I mean, that was shocking.
It really came out of nowhere. I don't recall hearing they'd been doing bad. Nothing like that.
The most I could find was there was report of a little bit of a loss over the past 2 months with Disney Infinity. Sales were down just a little bit, and then doors shut.
I'm curious if this signals an era of the Toys to Life coming to a close, but we'll see. I know Amiibo's still going strong, but that's a Nintendo-specific thing. I haven't heard anything about Skylanders in forever.
When I was looking some stuff up, Skylanders had taken a bit of a hit.
We'll see how that progresses.
The Call of Duty Backlash, I'm not 100% clear on that one, but that's been...
Call of Duty Infinite Warfare?
Yeah,
that's what it's called?
Yeah.
People are super pissed that they moved it into space. I don't know why. I always found the series to be pretty ridiculous anyways, but apparently moving it into space was a pretty big deal in a pretty negative kind of way. As a guy who doesn't play the games, nothing about that really jumps out at me. Are they not wanting to go full future?
I'm not a huge Call of Duty fan either. I find it so weird that suddenly this is what they're upset about. The going into space thing just seems a little...
I believe it is the second most disliked trailer on YouTube right now. Actually, second most disliked video. And that was...
What to say, isn't first Ghostbusters?
I don't think it's Ghostbusters. I think it's Justin Bieber's Baby. However, an important distinction there is that Justin Bieber's Baby has many million times more views than this trailer does. It's got the worst ratio, I think, of views. It's not great. But we can compare that to Battlefield 1, I believe it was.
Yeah, Battlefield 1. I'm intrigued. I've liked the Battlefield games, and I like history, so I'm curious to see a World War I game put to the test, so see how that works.
Machine guns were introduced during World War I, weren't they?
Yeah.
Introduced.
Most of your machine guns were the kind where, you had two people, one was holding up the chain bullets and loading it into the gun while the other one fired.
Chain-fed ammo.
Yeah.
That's what I'm really curious about, because they said there was going to be swords and
horses and biplanes.
Biplanes. That's not really going to be a shooter as we traditionally know it.
I mean, you still had guns that had like 6 bullet rounds to them, rifle-wise, so...
But depending on how much they decide to go the realistic route, you weren't going to carry, 70 pounds of ammo on you?
True.
And that's how much you use in any given 45 seconds in one of these games. So...
It will be interesting to see.
Yeah, I know I'm pretty interested. So, the things that came to me this week were Talos Principle 2 was announced. You never played Talos Principle, did you?
No.
It was a really interesting puzzle game, first-person puzzle game, that got into a lot of things about humanity, quandaries about humanity. And that was a really interesting game. The puzzles got a little long in the tooth. Something that I think more puzzle games should do is give you the option to have a buffer of certain puzzles you don't have to complete. I don't think enough games do that. There are optional puzzles, and I did end up beating this. I used a guide for a bit of it, just because I was getting in the home stretch, and I really wanted to see the plot. That is a sin to me, when a game hides plot behind arbitrary doors. I can understand it for certain progression. This was a puzzle game, so I can't hold it too much against it. Some of the other news that jumped out at me this week, Doom came out a week ago from today, and it's actually been getting really strong reviews. I don't know if you've seen that.
I haven't seen many of the reviews for Doom, though I do still want to play it, so...
Some people are bashing it because they're saying it's repetitive, blah, blah, blah. A lot of people are saying they really brought the franchise into the current generation without sacrificing what it used to be. It's got a stupid plot, but it's Doom. It's got fast action. It has non-obtrusive cutscenes. a non-obtrusive plot in general, and the action is apparently really enjoyable. That being said, nothing about it jumps out at me as, hey, I have to play this now. So I'm thinking it's probably going to be a $20 Black Friday purchase for me.
Yeah.
The other things that were brought up was Kojima showed the rest of his logo, which everybody thinks is going to tie into his first big game, which also then ties into the fact, did you hear about that Kojima World Tour?
I heard briefly something about it, but not a...
What it was he wasn't creating a new engine. There's no new Fox engine for his new game. He went to find a different engine to make this game. And he talked extensively about why he's still focusing on doing AAA games in his new endeavors and not going on to more indie things. And my guess is because it's Kojima. I'll admit I didn't read the interview or listen to the interview because Kojima's kind of a weird dude.
Yes.
Which isn't to say he doesn't make quality games, but much like Phil Fish, that was the French guy. Yeah, I remember Fish. Yeah. Just because you make a good game doesn't mean you can be an asshole.
Yeah.
Just doesn't mean you can be an unpleasant person. I don't think Kojima is overwhelmingly unpleasant. It's not fair to compare him and Fish, but he has a tendency, I've heard he has the habit of rubbing people the wrong way. In times, I know, not Kiefer Sutherland. Who came before him?
David Hayter?
David Hayter. David Hayter said he did not miss working with Kojima. And he said Kojima tried to get rid of him more than once.
But also so did Konami. And there's no... I think it's not just Kojima. I think he's done with Konami too. And frankly, Konami's probably done. So...
The thing that jumped out at me this last week that I was really excited in was they announced that RE7 would be at E3.
They also said it'd be a return to...
It'd be a return to its horror roots. That makes me nervous. Having just played Resident Evil 1 and 0, 1 was unbelievably cornball. It was crazy cheesy. Anybody who says the games used to be better hasn't played the games anytime recently. They are so doofy. They have always been doofy. It has always been ridiculous. If it's a good kind of horror, and that does exist, we've played games that have good atmospheric builds that aren't just jump scares.
Yeah.
But I don't see Resident Evil pulling that off. I mean, unless it's survival horror in more of a runaway sense, but they've always had a bad habit of you have to kill everything.
They have. And the original ones did heavily lean on the camera angles.
They brutally leaned on the camera angles. Having just beaten RE0, the camera angles were crucial in creating tension and also frustration. Because I can think of at least 4 times that we died because you couldn't see the zombie shambling towards you around the corner. It's just, with the progresses in technology, it started taking away from it. And one thing they're going to have to deal with is the fact that boss battles, not conducive to survival horror. Unless it's a puzzle boss. Puzzle boss can be survivor horror, but you can't kill a huge thing and still be really scared of it. If you can, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I've never seen it done well.
And the last several games have drastically moved away from horror to action, adventure.
You didn't even play 6.
Yeah.
So did you play 4?
Parts of it.
Okay, so you watched somebody else play is what I'm hearing. Yeah. 4 started going into action. It still had some survival horror, some horror elements. 5 basically went all action.
I mean, spoiler for what, a 7-year-old game at this point?
Indeed.
The last part where you fight on a ship and shoot at each other.
It's incredibly... I'm just curious to see at E3 what's going to happen. But moving on to your topic for the evening.
Right, so news of the week was we got the Assassin's Creed trailer this week for the movie, which will be coming out at Christmas. And I know we discussed this. It brought up an interesting topic about video game movies, the adaptations.
Now, just to be clear, these are adaptations that started as video games and then became movies.
Yes.
And we are including anything from almost a direct adaptation, let's say Mortal Kombat nebulously, to a generous adaptation like House of the Dead, which had nothing.
I thought you were going to include Super Mario Brothers, the movie.
Even so, I'd actually... that makes me sick. A quick side note about Super Mario Brothers movie. Did I ever tell you when I saw it in theaters as a child?
I think so.
So, what was interesting, this was the first time I had ever been disappointed by a movie in a theater. And that was so foreign to me because as a child, you'll pretty much be okay with anything. You're a child. But I remember going into it and thinking, oh my god, I'm going to see Super Mario Brothers on the big screen. And when I left, I couldn't understand why I felt bad. Like, it felt wrong. I didn't know what disappointment was at that age, and it just felt foreign. I remember I went with a friend, and the friend's mom goes, I heard there's a sequel in development. I heard they're working on a different, better one, because me and my friend were talking, and we were going, was that bad? Was Mario bad? It just didn't process. We had to be like, what, 7, 8?
1993 was.
Oh my god, we were 6. 6-ish, 5 or 6, Jesus. But yeah, going back to the Assassin's Creed trailer, I haven't seen it, but I've seen the stills and I've seen the pictures. It looks good, right?
I'm interested in it. I need more. The only weird thing about it is the animus is not the same.
It's the IV thing, isn't it?
It's like this weird arm that attaches to the back of him, and instead of it appears like, again, this is one trailer, and I talked with someone about this, and he said he felt that it showed that whatever he's doing in the past, like he's physically playing out those things.
Is it like the arm thing from Zoolander? Have you seen Zoolander? Is it around his arm?
No. Like it's this mechanical arm that comes and like attaches to the back of him.
So he has 3 arms.
No, it's coming from the ceiling. I'm calling it a mechanical arm, like this, kind of like a forklift type thing.
I'm going to have to see the trailer because your descriptions are terrible. But the buzz for it going in is pretty positive, isn't it?
It is. Like, one thing that does make me really curious was they were breaking down the movie, and I think it was like 60%.
65% current day, 35% back in time.
Which is complete opposite from the game.
No, it's the exact opposite. Where is it set in history? What time and where?
The history part is set during the Spanish Inquisition.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Which I'm intrigued by. And they never said, but I guess this brings in the point. The Assassin's Creed movie isn't a straight adaptation. It's set in the same universe as the games. So they're taking a route that I think interesting. You brought up Mortal Kombat is roughly a straight adaptation.
I mean, it was a straight adaptation, but they didn't have a lot to go off of. There was a lot of backstory midway developed.
It's a fighting game.
It's a fighting game.
I mean, they added fighting into a movie with a plot from the book to the cartridge, I guess.
I guess. Was there a book adaptation to Mortal Kombat before the movie?
Like,
Zelda Assassin's Creed?
No, like Mortal Kombat. Like Zelda had
the instruction
story
booklet.
and then instruction booklet.
The thing about adding story to the game, that brings up a point about the fact that Angry Birds just came out.
Yeah,
have you seen that?
No. I mean, it just came out today, so I haven't
really
seen it yet. Yeah.
Oh, I've been seeing reviews for like a week. I thought it came out last week. Oh.
Well, Angry Birds, Ratchet and Clank. Well, Angry Birds is a game without story, just like
exactly
the announcement of the Tetris sci-fi trilogy this week.
God, I want to know where that's going. It would be one thing if it was just a movie, but a trilogy?
Like I told you, I mean, to me, Tetris barely scratches a movie parody that stars like Adam Sandler. Turning to like some kind of sci-fi epic just seems.
It was
so
a joke
weird.
in Pixels, was it? It seems like it would be a joke in Pixels, a 15-second throwaway gag. But video game movies in general, they've always had kind of a stigma against them, haven't they?
Yeah, and when I was looking up for this, I mean, we were wrong. We thought there was a dip and lull in video games.
You thought there was a dip. Well, there was theatrical releases, consistent theatrical releases. And what if you take Pokemon out of the equation?
I did.
Okay.
It was just live action.
All right.
Live action, North American.
theatrical releases.
Yeah, since 1999, there's at least on average been at least 2 movies a year.
Interesting. So, what are some of those? And I don't suppose you got any of the review scores by chance. But
there weren't any when the thing I was... Well, like half of them are all the Resident Evil movies right there.
Okay, you've seen a lot of those. So, what are your... Yeah.
Progressively, they've gotten far worse. I like the first 2. They felt like a homage to the game, and then they felt like they really went... The games feel weird, and the movies just got bizarre.
I know that I think I watched the 4th one.
That's where I haven't seen the 5th one. I read the plot, and I couldn't do it.
Was the 4th one the one where the movie starts with the army of clones?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the one I saw. The one where
everything that Umbrella makes comes with an automatic nuclear self-destruct system.
There is a lot. If everybody's dead, I guess you can nuke everything. But that was a weird example because they kind of involved the first game and second game. I remember when that came out because now that you're saying it, I'm remembering more. Silent Hill came out around the same time as the first Resident Evil movie.
I really liked the first Silent Hill movie.
I enjoyed it. Did you see the second Silent Hill movie?
I've not.
I did. Do not see it. It actually made me question if I liked the first one.
Really?
It was so bad.
Oh.
I was flabbergasted because I remembered enjoying the first one even though a lot of people didn't, and I can see why they wouldn't. But after seeing the second one, I had to wonder, did I really enjoy the first one or was I just stupid? Because there's so many bad plot choices and it got terrible reviews. But going back to my first point, people were talking to me and they were saying, I can't go see the first Resident Evil movie. Why? Well, because it has a liquor in it. What does that matter? Well, the liquors were in the second game. Okay, well, as a curiosity, do you have any interest in the Silent Hill movie? Well, yeah, I think that looks awesome. Right. Doesn't Pyramid Head look amazing? Oh, he looks incredible. Cool. It doesn't bother you that he wasn't in the first game? Well, I didn't think of that. Right, it's a movie. You mentioned this when we were talking before the show. The direct adaptation of comic books to movies just usually doesn't work. In the same vein, I feel like a direct adaptation of most games to movies doesn't work.
Well, so you're going to go pay money to watch the exact same thing over again? I mean, I want the same feel. I want the same elements of it, but I don't need it to be the exact same thing reproduced like frame for frame. That's just weird and boring.
Yeah.
But like this year alone, we got Assassin's Creed coming out at Christmas. We've had Ratchet and Clank already came out.
That did not get great reviews. I heard that the reason it didn't get great reviews was it played it so safe it was boring.
The thing I saw claimed it was a 90-minute
cutscene. The Advent Children much, right? You weren't even sitting there when I went and bought that movie. So I bought it when it came out. I
watched it.
You didn't watch it with us, though. I'm almost positive you didn't.
I may have watched it by myself.
Because Aaron and I watched it, and then as soon as it was over, I turned to him and I go, you want to buy a movie? I had no desire to watch it. It was it wasn't even 90, it was like 70-minute cutscene. And it was okay, I guess. It was, 4 fight scenes stitched together with very thin dialogue?
It was like all the stuff they wanted to put into the game, but they didn't.
Right, and now, 10 years later, they're actually coming out with a game. So
I will not be shocked if it's a part of it. But then we have Warcraft coming out this summer.
All right. I'm curious to see how that's going to pan out.
I'm curious how much it's World of Warcraft or how much it's actually Warcraft. It feels like it's a mix of both.
Well, I think it's gotta be a mix of both because Warcraft mostly for the first 2 games focused on humans good, orcs bad. Yeah?
Yeah, I guess
it did.
I guess it's the DLC to the second one where they added the undead. So yeah, I guess that's right.
Did they add them then? I thought they showed up in the third one.
They briefly start coming through in the DLC.
Coming through, the Legion was a bunch of asteroids or something, I thought.
I thought it was it's been so long at this point. But anyways, they're briefly in the DLC and then they don't make it into the... But yeah, I'm curious how that one's going to go. Then you have things like Sly Cooper coming out and the last Resident Evil movie next year.
Ugh.
And then they just rebooted. They're going to reboot Lara Croft. Tomb Raider.
I'm curious how that's going to go. I saw the first one of those, not the second one of those. It wasn't anything to write home about, especially since the new games are so cinematic. They're going to try to make it like those games, and unless they have a particularly empowering, because they cast Lara Croft, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
Unless she really brings it, it's not going to capture.
And, well, that's the thing, like, Assassin's Creed, I think they're taking the route, because we were talking about movie video games. Star Wars and Enter the Matrix are good examples of games that weren't straight adaptations of movies. Tons of Star Wars games are set in the same universe, and Enter the Matrix is coinciding with one film, ending when the next one starts. It's a good way. They're not adaptations, so they're not boring, and they add something to the other. And I think Assassin's Creed trying that route with the movie not being a straight adaptation of one of the games, instead being set in the same universe, is probably a better route to take than just straight up adapting each game. Plus the fact that 2012 has since come and gone. So
yeah. I want it to be good. All the pictures look good. Michael Fassbender is a good actor.
yeah.
God, I want it to be good.
I think the problem is overwhelmingly there's been so many bad video game movies over the years.
There has been.
But there's been good ones and there's been all right ones. I think the Mortal Kombat movies are pretty good.
No, the first one was okay.
Well,
the second one was hot
really,
garbage.
You also really like the web series.
I like the first season of the web
I never
series.
saw the second season.
The second season is not as good, which is weird. I had high hopes, and there's a reason we haven't heard anything about that in 3 years at this point.
But also over the years we've had a lot of like anime. I think another Dead Space doing the animated movies and stuff like that was always. I mean, they're not fantastic, but they were interesting.
They were interesting additions to the universe, especially the second one, which was saying something with those horrible CG inner. It looked bad. It looked really bad. Do you have any final thoughts about video game adaptations? Maybe in the future we can look at it the other way around and see movies that were turned into games.
Yeah, there are a lot of those.
There are a lot of those, and a lot of them are terrible.
I'm hoping Assassin's Creed is good. I'm hoping some of these are good. So, we'll see.
I hope Assassin's Creed's good. I know Uncharted is reportedly back in the works.
Yeah.
We'll see how that goes. It will be an interesting cinematic frontier, to be sure. My topic for this week was on Sunday, I finally hunkered down and finished up Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. Now, a thing about Everybody's Gone to the Rapture is it was pretty divisive. I don't know if you saw any of the reviews when it came out.
No.
It was strongly accused of being a walking simulator. This is a very derivative term for games in which what you seem to do is mostly walk around and not really interact with the environment. You mostly just listen and walk. Other games in this genre include Gone Home, Dear Esther, which was also made by the Chinese Room, who did Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. I nebulously included Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs, which is an interesting one, as it was also made by the Chinese Room, but it was not the first game in the series. It was a frictional game that got given to the Chinese Room to develop. Now, you can make a case that since you actually have to run away from enemies and you have to solve puzzles, that it's not so much of a walking simulator, but you spend most of the game walking and looking. I'll neglect A Machine for Pigs from this list, but Gone Home, Dear Esther, Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, The Stanley Parable, you see it a lot in these indie type games. And some people can say it is a way to force narrative. It's a way to make you go down the particular story they want to tell because they have a definite story they want to tell. I know you've played Gone Home, at the very least.
I've played 3 of the ones you mentioned. I watched you play part of Everybody's Gone to the Rapture.
When you watched me play, I played it terrible. I actually feel bad because having replayed it and beaten it, there are some parts of that were actually really moving. And it made me sad. So,
I was intrigued enough that I debated picking it up at some point because I'd like to see the whole thing.
It was interesting when all was said and done. And that kind of brings the next point around is, do you personally believe that Walking Simulator is an appropriate term? Is it a bad term? Is it a derivative term? If somebody tells you that this game is a walking simulator, does that affect whether or not you're going to buy it? Just
I
from
think
that
it
term.
I think it's being used as a derogatory term. I don't know. Because you say that Stanley Parable, man, I loved that game. I've made so many people play that game.
Stanley Parable was my indie game of the year for that particular game. And I remember one of our friends, you may have been over when he said this, he said that they started playing the Stanley Parable, and when they beat it, they couldn't play other games for a while because of the way the narrative breakdown goes. And after I'd beaten it, I had to agree with him because of the way it approaches storytelling and the fact that even though it's not truly an endless choice, they give you so many branching paths that it almost feels like it. I remember, and this isn't a spoiler because it's kind of a difficult thing to do. The first real ending I got was when I broke the game and they started sending you into other games. And that's when I fell in love with that game.
I remember the part, I don't have the patience to do this ending, the part where he talks about the baby, and if you keep pressing the button, the baby won't die in 4 hours. I remember asking if that was a real ending. You said yes. Yes,
It is
it
a
was.
real
I'm like,
ending.
oh, I do not have the patience to sit here for 4 hours and click a button. I just do not.
Well, and a little bit into it, it might be like 2 hours. He changes it so either the baby moves faster or he does something where like you can't just keep clicking it, or there's a trick to it so that way you just can't sit it to like auto click. Like the
Okay.
button might move or something.
Okay.
They're smarter than you would think. I think Dear Esther and Gone Home are two good ones to focus on because Dear Esther was straight up a walking
Yeah,
simulator.
Dear Esther was. I really liked Gone Home, but the story was really good. So.
The story was really good, and it was one of the things where the whole gender identity, that kind of thing, was really coming to the forefront in the gaming community at the time. And I thought it was really interesting, and it was really well executed.
I also thought that the game was going to take a really, really dark turn
At the very end.
Yeah.
So, spoilers for Gone Home in case you haven't played this game that's been out for, 3 years?
Yeah.
Ish. So, near the end, when you are going up to the attic, because that's where all the notes are leading you that you find around the house, I have not talked to a single person yet who didn't think you were going to find your sister's body in the attic.
Nope. Yep.
But then it takes a really happy turn, and in addition to that, this is where I don't think Walking Simulator needs to be used in a bad way, is the fact that it wasn't just about the sister, though. They managed to weave the sister's problems into the dad's problems and the mom's problems. It all came together really well.
So one thing about it, and I don't know if you felt, I don't know if it's because I was coming off other horror games when I've been playing, but the atmosphere of coming home to the empty house with the lights flickering and the rain outside, it still gave you this really creepy, eerie feeling.
That's another thing I'm noticing about a lot of these walking simulators is they have a kind of creepy vibe because Dear Esther kind of had a creepy vibe.
And the thing about Dear Esther, you had that flashlight. That was...
I played it twice because the first time it didn't save my data. Yeah. Well, it's an hour and a half long game where you essentially are walking in a straight line.
I think I walked some of it out of order, but that...
Yeah.
You can do
You
that.
can do that. I remember the flashlight vaguely.
I liked it, but it's a walking sim.
Yeah. Gone Home, on the other hand, this is where Walking Simulator, for somebody who really wants to tell a story like that, Walking Simulator is almost a necessary evil. Because how would they have presented the story to you in a cohesive fashion had they not basically forced you to just walk around? Now, one thing, and you did watch enough of Everybody's Gone to Rapture to see this, I hate when they constrict your movement speed. That drives me up the wall. That was the one big thing about Everybody's Gone to the Rapture that killed me, was you walked so slow. And you could trot, but you could never move fast. And restricting your movement and that kind of thing is just a bad time. Nobody wins.
I feel like you can get a good story with a walking sim. Like a good walking sim is going to have a good story. Yeah, there's terrible ones, and if it's not your thing, I wouldn't play it.
No,
But
no, no. And that's an important distinction right there is you go into this knowing that it's all about the narrative and the presentation. So the people who come into it and complain that there's not much gameplay or there's not many puzzles to action to whatever, that's not what you signed up for. So I think I will continue to buy what is designated as a walking simulator, but it will need to have very strong reviews. One in particular that I'm curious about, because can you name any walking simulators you've played that have not been first person?
no.
I have played one that's not been first person. It was called Kentucky Route Zero. It was a overhead third person type game. I can't remember if I described it as hyper realistic or surrealistic. It's really weird, but the flow of these always goes, I don't know what's going on. I'm not sure I'm feeling this. Whoa. Oh my god, that was crazy. And I'm always looking forward to the next one. But they have had an enormous break between episodes. What this ties into is there's a game that is on PS4. It's definitely on the Xbox One, but it might be coming to the PS4 called Oxenfree. I'll have to show it to you once it's over. It's not supposed to have a lot of gameplay, mostly walking type stuff, but it looks really interesting. But as I have a constraint on my time, walking simulators are 1 degree above visual novels. They are.
Yeah.
It's a visual novel where they don't actually make it a novel. I'm enjoying them, and I will probably continue to play them regardless. Do you have any more to add on
No.
this? Okay. So the last thing we were going to get into, and this is prompted by Uncharted 4 came out last Friday. And it's been getting crazy good reviews. I think it's got like a 91 on Metacritic right now. That's an overwhelmingly amount of positive reviews, 1 neutral review, and 1 negative review. That's 1 negative review out of over 80, I believe. And one of the actors in it voiced his support for a petition for that review to be removed from Metacritic. And that's because there's a weird, and it's not new, and hear me out on this, there's a weird culture where any negativity is viewed as bad. Not even negativity in the sense of being negative, but being counter what other people are saying.
Yeah.
So if a game or a movie comes out to almost universal disdain, but somebody says something positive about it, people will ask, what kind of taste do you have if you think this terrible thing is a great thing?
Yeah.
And
that's a big thing.
so this guy, he just didn't like Uncharted. He might not have been completely fair in his appraisal of it because he may have been unnecessarily harsh because the game is supposed to be technically sound, a lot of fun, yada yada yada. But he might not have just liked it. He might have found it boring, repetitive, etc. But does he deserve to be bashed?
I don't think so. A problem I have with reviewers, especially taking reviewers seriously, who, and I've read them time and time again, where they start out going, I never liked this series to begin with. It's like, I
don't want to listen to your opinion then.
Because you're automatically going to hate this.
You're coming out the gate swinging.
Because I can think of a few websites where I've seen.
And I know some publications that when you still read publications, they actually said when someone was reviewing a game, they had them rank their favorite genres from most to least. So if somebody who loved an RPG was rating an RPG, I'd be more likely to listen to them. Which I thought was a really good system and ahead of its time. That might have been EGM, but I could be totally wrong.
Well, you know my opinions on reviews. I don't really listen to them. I'm more apt to listen to people I know, just because I know similar tastes, similar things like that. To me, reviewers always look, and that's part of why I wanted to talk about this, because I mean, there's been the cultural problem for a while now where you have people leaving game studios where they're like, the problem with Metacritic is that all these big publishers are using it as the definitive by which they judge production standards. And
that's not a new thing. I want to clear that up here and now, is that I remember back when Atari was still making games. Are they currently making games? If they are, I have no idea what they are. They were proposing that their pay be based on review scores. And it was a penny arcade comic because it said, Atari founder threatens to choke self to death with crepe after this comes out. Because they had not been putting out hits at that point. So this idea of giving pay based on scores, and that feeds into a bigger problem because then you can hear studios are being forced to give scores above sevens or in some cases eights. Example, a few years back, do you remember the Kane and Lynch 2 debacle?
Not exactly.
So a site was paid oodles of money to advertise Kane and Lynch. Side banners, top banner, interactive thing for Kane and Lynch 2 Dog Days. And this reviewer came out and blasted the game. Just destroyed it. And he got fired. So that's a clear conflict of interest. If you can't give an honest review of a game that you're advertising for, then you're not really being fair. And on top of that, this was another trope I was reading about, the 4-point scale and 8.8. These are both tropes that I think apply to this conversation. Have you heard of either of these? The 4-point scale is the idea that no game gets less than a 7.
Well, this is something we've talked about where I feel anything worth 1 out of 10 where people refuse to buy games that get less than a 7. At that point, why are you rating out of 10? Why not out of 5?
And this is a discussion that I've had with other people as well. It's kind of a misnomer having the 1 out of 10. It's not a good thing because if I hate a game, but it's because I don't enjoy it, should that game be rated a 3 when it was technically sound? Whereas if this game I enjoyed all the gameplay, The Walking Dead Season 1, it had an amazing plot. I loved the characters. It should not have won all those Game of the Years. It was technically unsound, especially when it was out. While I loved it, if I would have had to review it on a technical basis, would have got like a 6 out of 10. I had freezes. I had where it dropped on me. That game messed up a lot. So
I never had any issues.
I know we always are the exact opposite. If you have a bunch of issues, I don't. If the game is technically competent, I will give it a 6.5 or higher, because I don't feel it's fair to punish a game for me not liking it just because I don't like it. Example, Lightning Returns. I despised everything about that game, but it was a technically competent game. I didn't like the battle system. I despised the story. I hated the characters. The battle system, it wasn't for me. Does that mean it was bad? Not necessarily. Some people really got into it. So that game I rated, I think, like a 6 because I hated everything about it, but it was a technically competent game. Whereas on the other hand, the regular show 3DS game, I wanted to love it, but it was just a boring boilerplate game. So I couldn't rate it above like a 6.5. We can take this discussion beyond just Metacritic to why the numerical score isn't great, because you're not addressing the many complexities.
No.
Because with a movie, let's compare a video game review to a movie review. You can complain about some of the technical aspects like the lighting and the sound and all that, but it never makes a movie unwatchable. It can make it painful, but you can still get to the end of the movie.
Yeah.
There can be games that are so deeply broken that you can't play them. So,
Yes, there can.
Yeah, I know you've played them. I know I've played them. Broforce was a fun game, but technically, especially online, it was destroyed.
Yeah. I mean, it was fun to play when I played it with you guys, but there were oh man, that last boss.
Oh, that wasn't even the last boss.
Really?
Was it? Is this a spoiler? I mean, you see him in every level. Is this
Satan.
a spoiler? Yeah, Satan.
Yeah, I was there when you played him.
Right, but spoiler.
Oh,
right.
Spoiler.
Yeah,
Sorry.
cool.
Well, whatever.
Satan Tower. Did you get to Satan Tower where the big Satan worm came up out of the ground? I don't think you got to Satan Tower.
I was there in the explosion.
Oh, you didn't get to the final boss. There was more. There was Satan Tower, which had big spider legs. It was... God, that Satan fight, that was a total mess. That was a cluster. Oh, I'm remembering that now. Where he went invisible. Oh my god.
Fight him?
Yeah, that was ridiculous. That's the kind of game where it was fun, but it was technically broken online. So that's the kind of game where I would rate it a 6, but I would rate it a 6 with the caveat of it's a ton of fun when it works. So it's not fair to give these numbers. An older example, Splatterhouse, came out on the PS3 and 360. It had a lot of flaws, but if it was the kind of thing you were looking for, it was a ton of fun. So I didn't like giving people a review score because that didn't encapsulate the fact that, sure, it's got a couple problems. The checkpoints could be a little more generous. The instant death has some shenanigans. They could have mapped the block and the roll to different buttons. That was kind of shady on their part. But it was really fun beat 'em up mindlessness. And I'm willing to bet you have a game like that too, where it's essentially your guilty pleasure.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some off the top of my head. Sometimes some first-person shooters, I could consider them that.
A lot of your old Star Wars PC games, I think, were they technically solid? I don't know.
I don't. What games? Like
I don't
Battle
know.
Battlegrounds, the Star Wars Age of Empires. I mean, it was technically sound.
You are asking the wrong.
I know.
Person.
I'm trying to think of. I'm trying to go through my entire game collection and find good examples of those kind of things.
Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. That is an excellent example, especially because a lot of people railed on it. You were one of them because it got away from the Metal Gear Solid seriousness. When Kojima handed it over to Platinum Games, it got decidedly more silly. I'm not. Yeah, okay. Metal Gear Rising spoiler. Are you gonna ever play it?
No.
Okay, cool. Have I told you about the final boss?
Probably, but
Why it's the best thing? So you spend this whole game running around destroying these Metal Gear Rays, and everything is just so over the top. And the senator who's funding everything, he manages to not get cut by your blade. What in the world? And can you guess where this is going? Can ya? You see his fist turn black, and then he pounds on his chest and he goes, nanomachines. Boom! Oh my god. They really went there. So, the final boss fight, this is not an exaggeration, is against a burly senator who's hulked out on nanomachines. It's crazy. But it's a guilty pleasure. It was fun. It was so much fun. And it was ridiculous. I would buy a Revengeance too. That game was fun. Once they handed it over to Platinum Games, I think you wrote it off too fast. I thought it was a ton of fun personally.
When it comes to review scores, I don't know. Like, I really think condensing down to 5, even though I totally agree that a numbered system isn't really good, I will buy games up to a point where if I had to rank them a 2.5, but I'll buy them at a reduced cost. Gears of War is that to me. I would not buy those at full price. Like, I am glad I never bought any of them at full price. So,
quick side note, you saw the collector, the Ultimate Edition for Gears of War 4?
I did not.
Woo! For $300, maybe more, you can get JD Phoenix, something like that. It's such a bro-y name, you just want to punch him in the stomach. You can get him resting casually on a motorcycle, a Gears of War type motorcycle, and you can get it in the COG variant or the stranded variant. So he can be wearing his vest or he can be wearing his shirt. God. Did you see the trailer for that? With the trailer for Gears of War 4?
The TV commercial?
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Oh my, I like how they combine a cornball game with a terrible cover. That is a bad cover. They should not have let them. Just as a quick side note about that cover, I was listening to the radio one day and they accidentally hit a button and it caused them to go over the beginning of the song. And they started getting a bunch of text saying, I can't believe you played over the song. You ruined the song. And they go, no, you know who ruined that song? Disturbed ruined that song. It's not a good cover. Dialing it back several notches at that point. I don't think a number score is fair. I think that's what it comes down to. That Metacritic, I will agree that I don't go necessarily, you'll disagree on some level that I don't do this. But I try not to go just with what Metacritic says, but we are both adults with limited time. If I have to make a choice of games, and I've done research on all of them, and I've looked at the gameplay videos, yada, 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 and I have to see what other people think. Because If a bunch of other people are giving it rave reviews, they're probably not all wrong. But if a bunch of people are giving it incredibly negative reviews, I have to look at that and go, are these negative reviews because it's not what people wanted? Looking at you, Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. Are these negative reviews because it misdelivered? Are these negative reviews because the game is broken? Example, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 5. I warned you. I warned you a million times over.
Well, and the other problem with that one was I couldn't get a review. I couldn't find anything that told me the setup of the game. I loved the first three. Those were great to me. And then there was the other problem, we're talking about reviews. I read the review on one site and they were talking about how it's technically broken like the HD one and the original HD of Tony Hawk 2.
I remember we didn't have problems.
I never had a single problem with that game.
Did I tell you the moment where I knew that game was broken before it came out?
Probably, but
They reviewed it on Conan. They did a Clueless Gamer. And while they were playing it, I noticed that when Conan was going around, you'd have kind of the stanky leg when he landed. Like his leg would start jittering and he'd be kind of blah, 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 like he'd all ragdoll. This was a retail copy they gave to somebody. So I knew the game was going to be broken. The fact that there was no pre-press, the fact that they weren't really given a lot of information going into it.
And that comes to another question, and it debates if it's really affected by this or not, rushing games out to meet expectations and scores. And I think companies have become way too comfortable with patching their games after the fact, and that's affected a lot of things.
Well, one of the most significant things it's affected recently, did you hear about the Street Fighter V thing?
No.
So Street Fighter V, there was a lot of hype leading up to it. And it came out without a real single-player campaign. It came out incredibly buggy, needing a lot of patches. They said it wasn't complete when it was coming out. And now they're saying, we think in the future we're just going to push back the game. I don't know how this is a revelation either.
Like Miyamoto said once, people are going to forget pushing the game back, but they're going to remember a bad game.
A delay is something people will be mad about for a little while. A terrible game is something people will be mad about forever. And you see that. And Nintendo catches a lot of flack when they do that kind of thing. Looking at you, Zelda U. But if it came out and people hated it, Nintendo would never let it down.
But you have a lot of companies like EA, Activision. It feels like they push out to meet these scores that they want to get in these absurd timetables just to push games out. And I'm not sure Metacritic is 100% to blame for that, but I do feel like they're a necessitous on getting high scores.
Well, Metacritic's too specific. We should go with
reviews in general.
Well, yeah, score aggregations. You see a lot of these game review sites. I know, even though I despise Kotaku, I admire that they did this. They were one of the first to move away from numbered scores because they recognized it wasn't a fair way to evaluate things. In fact, a lot of gaming publications back in the day, they were noting the distribution of their scores. One in particular, I think it was EGM again, they never scored anything 10 because their thing was a game is only 10 if it is perfect, both technically and as a perfect product of the medium. But what defines perfect? They didn't give GoldenEye a 10, I don't think. But that might have actually been one of the first ones they did give it. So that actually goes back to the next thing. I mentioned there were two tropes. One of them was the 4-point scale from 7 to 10.
Yeah, and the 8.
The 8.8, I mentioned that.
Yeah, you didn't say.
Oh, so you knew about this already.
Go on.
Okay. So 8.8 is the idea that it kind of goes into your thing of people won't buy a game if it's below an 8. If it's a game they think is amazing, anything less than a perfect score is tantamount to something absolutely terrible, like you've committed a war crime. I believe the 8.8 trope was coined when Ocarina of Time for N64 got a review of 8.8 when everything else was given at 10s. Metal Gear Solid 4 had very similar controversy, you might remember.
Yeah.
People were flipping out when it got a 9. You remember that?
Uh-huh.
Some places were giving it 9s instead of 10s. I think in some cases they were 9.5s.
Yeah.
Were you reading Penny Arcade at the time?
No.
That was one of my favorite ones because they go, guys, I'm not sure if you understand numbers because here's 9 and it's right next to 10. So you're calling it a war crime or as bad as the Holocaust. And I say it's really close. So it's not really like it's the death of millions of people. At which point 9 said, if I kill 10, then I will be the new 10. Is that how it works? But in games people love, if they get anything less than perfect, they think that something has gone terribly wrong. So
Yeah. Yeah, you want the score, but you're a business. Is the score what's keeping the lights on? It's the money. I mean, I understand it is, but I think also gamers need to stop looking at those overall scores as definitive 7.5. I don't purchase anything, and
I know that you don't like it when I say blah 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 score, but what I really focus on in these scores is a lot of places give the breakdown of the pros and the cons, which can give you some idea of both the strength of the review and how it affects you directly. For example, Pokemon Alpha Sapphire? Yeah, as Alpha Sapphire Omega Ruby.
yeah.
I remember maybe IGN reviewed it, and their one negative I remember seeing, too much water. For real? Are you serious?
When I read their TV show reviews, I see the same. I read the stuff that they don't like and the stuff they do, and you're right. It does give you, do I agree with this person at all? And that's a better way to go about it.
The pros and the cons, I think, are a really good way to approach any review. And that's something that whenever I give a review to somebody, I can love something to death. For example, The Witness recently, Stanley Parable, Papers, Please, going further back, BioShock Infinite, Infinite Burial at Sea. The first thing I will do is I will list off everything I had a problem with. Because I have never, ever seen or played anything I didn't have a problem with.
Everything has a flaw.
It does
It's
have
going to.
It does. And that's why I bring them up first. Because I want to know it's not just complete and total fanboying, that I'm still trying to evaluate it critically and look what could potential shortcomings be. Because then after I get them all riled up with all the hate, I then give all the positive. So with The Witness, I know they don't give you any direction. That was kind of the point. It's not laid out always in a cohesive way that you'll progress through the puzzles in a way you'll understand. That's one of the downsides. The upside is it has the best method of teaching you how to play the game by just playing the game that I've seen in literally years. So it was really positive in that result. The Stanley Parable, for example, the negatives can include the fact that there's really not much to do once you know everything, but the way it breaks down the narrative is some of the cleverest that I'd seen in years. Or BioShock Infinite. The story, phenomenal. The gameplay, forgettable.
Yeah, I won't disagree there.
Now, Burial at Sea, I actually found to be significantly improved on that because they gave you a stealth option. I told you I beat the game the first time in 1999 mode.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was pretty proud of that. It was super fun.
See, I don't know. I focus on the things I like. I will normally take the opinions of people I know before I ever take a review because I know if we have similar tastes or not before I take seriously someone I don't know. So
Are there any critics, game sites that you actually give a lot of?
not a whole lot. I mean, if I'm on the fence, and I gotta be super on the fence, I'll peruse it, see what they had to say. And even some of the games I do like, occasionally I will look at the reviews, but like Star Fox Zero, not everyone liked it. I still got it.
Well, you still got it, but that was something you were also looking forward to a lot. And have you encountered any of the problems? What was the biggest problem they said about Star Fox Zero?
Well, it'll be the controls.
Right.
And from what little I played on the tutorial so far, because I haven't got a chance to start it up yet, it's going to be different. So I can't argue that one. But again, if you do new controls, if you try something, it's going to be different. It's not, if you just make the same thing over again to please people, you're just carbon copying the same thing. And
I saw something the other day, actually, that rung really true about this. Back when the DualShock was introduced,
yeah,
with the joysticks, it was somebody that did a review of like an Alien game back then. And they said the real horror came from the control scheme. You use one stick to move forward, backward, and strafe, and the other stick to aim. That was cited as a significant weakness. What is now the foundation
of every first-person shooter.
Every first-person shooter. So it's a time thing. It's a perspective thing. You gotta try new things in order to make progress.
I think it gives you... I saw an option that I could shut something off. So, I mean, I'll try it. And I know you said...
it'd be the gyroscopic control.
I think that's what it is. And I think you said you were going to try it with 2 people controls. So.
Yeah, we'll see how that... I'm less than confident in how that's going to turn out, but that's a me thing. So,
but yeah, I'll read them, but I'm not 100% taking into what they're saying into my consideration about what
I remember, and this is the long ago at this point, that there was a time, I feel, where you would listen to people's opinions more, and one of those in particular, and I'm not meaning to needlessly bash the guy, but was Yahtzee.
I don't think I ever actually didn't buy a game based on his opinion.
I don't think that you may have necessarily bought or not bought a game, but you did echo opinions that he echoed. And an issue that he ran into and why I stopped listening to him was there were times he distinctly had no idea what he was talking about.
Yeah, that started to become a thing. That's why I stopped.
And it frustrated me tremendously. I remember Super Paper Mario in particular. This is the one I always bring up. There's a puzzle that's actually really clever. You have to go through 3 tiers of money making in order to get through this puzzle. First, you have to do manual labor. Then you have to run in a hamster wheel. Then the hamster wheel lets you find a cache of money because you have to get $1 million to get out of this area. Or what you could do is run on this hamster wheel for an hour if you didn't figure out there was a puzzle. The goal was a puzzle. He ran on the hamster wheel. I couldn't. That's where I had to draw the line.
I remember one that got to me was the Assassin's Creed 2. Like, one of the things you enjoyed was making our city all bright and shiny, and he just hated it.
Yeah. Well, that's why you... Oh.
And there's another thing when you turn reviewing into a humor thing, when you're just making it into an online parody show. It's the point at which do people take it seriously or they just acknowledge it's a joke?
Right. Do they know it's hyperbole?
I mean, for me, I realized it was a joke. Some of it rang true, some of it didn't, but I know a lot of people that they watch those things and that's like the Bible by which they live by.
So we got to wrap this up. If you had to give your own type of review, how would you do it for games?
Definitely is this game purchasable or not purchasable? Kind of Kotaku and at least some of what IGN does with bullet points about what makes the game not good or bad.
So I know I personally would go with the pros and cons heavily. I would say what kind of person this game might appeal to and whether or not, given my tastes, I would buy it. That is how I would approach this kind of thing. So, but I think that's about all the time we have for today. Brent, thank you very much for coming on.
Yep.
And my name is Josh, and we will see you next time on Co-Opinions.